So last night, something wonderful happened. We got rain! I'm so excited. Like, it's probably been a month since we've had, like, any precipitation whatsoever. And at that, it was like, maybe a quarter of an inch, not even enough to show up in a rain gauge. It is dry as a bone here. Like, literally, when I walk through the yard, every step you take is just like, poof, dust comes up. So we probably got, like, well over an inch last night, and it is just, oh, it's wonderful. Also, it is much cooler in here. You can see I've got something warm on today. And really, like, all summer long, I've just been sweating in here, and it's so nice to be fresh. Almost have tempted to fire up the wood stove, but that might be a little bit ridiculous. We don't quite need that yet, but I'm just really stoked about the weather that we've got coming for like the next week or two. Oh, it feels really weird to say this, but I'm kind of happy that summer is coming to an end. All right, so what I've got planned for today, I've got a bunch of Kydex work I need to get done. I'm gonna kind of press on through that stuff throughout this week. Hopefully I can get all my orders that are outstanding. Hopefully I can get all that stuff done and shipped out by Friday. That's my goal. Got a bunch of sharpening to do today. I've got to finish up a couple other. I'm just so excited that it is not going to be like over 100 degrees Fahrenheit in here today. That is refreshing. Woo! Temperature outside, it's actually going down. It's getting cooler as the day goes on. So you know what, I'm gonna kind of break down and I'm gonna fire up my fireplace. The very first time this year I've had it going. I'm actually really excited. I love my wood stove. So let's go ahead and get that fired up, and then I've got some other product, something we're gonna try. I've never tried it before, but I'm really curious about it. Okay, so what we have here, I had a video on this like way back in the day, like not this one, obviously, a different one, but I call this the gentleman's boat knife. And the idea is it's kind of a rigging type knife for working on boats. I know a lot of them kind of come down like this a little more. I was doing a little bit of testing on a belt with this, so I kind of started grinding one bevel. Obviously I've already drilled out all my holes, pins, and everything else. So this thing is kind of well underway, but it has been sitting in this condition probably for like 8 months. And since we kind of got a whole bunch of other stuff done today, so I'm gonna do a little work on this. And what I'm gonna try to do is, this is some pretty beefy stock. And so I'm gonna try a tapered tang. And now I've never done a tapered tang, but I really like the idea of them. And I guess kind of, let me flip it over here. I guess the idea is you basically kind of come in wherever your handles start. and you start working it towards a much thinner tang here, so it kind of spreads out as it gets towards the blade. That will help reduce the weight. It also looks incredibly elegant, and I don't know. I've seen a lot of knife makers that I really admire. They do a lot of tapered tangs, and so I figured, you know what, it's about time I give it a shot. Not entirely sure how you would do that. Before I actually get to the tang, I'm actually going to finish grinding in these bevels, just in a rough grind again, leaving a bit of meat there so we can clean them up post heat treat. So let's jump on the grinder, and we'll get these bevels set, and then we'll figure out how we're going to mark out these lines. I guess I'm thinking we should use some lines, but I don't know. We'll try something. All right, and since we're just doing the one blade and it's a nice big blade, I'm gonna see how the freehand grinds are going today. So we're not gonna use a jig at all. Just kind of, you know, come in here and see if you can get some nice looking bevels, freehand. Who knows? You know, I find I've got good days and bad days. Some days I just come up here and like boom, it's like no issues whatsoever. And other days I can't grind a straight line to save my life, so then I'll switch to a jig. We're just gonna try it without a jig. Hopefully we're feeling it today. Hopefully everything's going good. And I like the temperature I'm working at, so that's kind of an important thing. For grinding, I kind of like a cool temperature. So yeah, let's do this. This floor is really slippery. From grinding the Kydex, it's like it's ice. Let's hit a couple grinding tips while we're here. Obviously I put my tool rest back on, and the reason for that is that I was having a hard time keeping my hands really steady. They're kind of moving and bouncing on the wheel. Sometimes that just happens, sometimes it depends on the belt you're using. A lot of times when that's happening, instead of just switching to a jig right away, I'll just put the rest on here. That way this hand is supported, and it helps out when you want to get really nice straight lines for your grind lines, and then also your plunge lines. Sometimes just having your work rest back on here, you're still doing it freehand, but it just steadies that hand there so you can kind of get nice motion and really control you know, where you're working on the wheel, and that's not moving. It takes away that variable for you. And then another thing, I mean, I've talked about it before on this channel, is when you're coming into your wheel, you don't ever want to come in like this. Once you practice to get better, I can usually come and just touch and just find exactly where we're even right there. But you always want to err on the side of touching your edge first and then bringing it to the wheel, rather than touching the back more towards the spine and then bring it to the wheel. If you do this, instantly this line has gone up and you've got to bring this up higher. Sometimes you run out of blade to do that. You can wreck knives. I've wrecked tons of knives by doing that. So I always think about when I'm trying to find my datum point, my flat spot on the wheel, touch your tip down just slightly first and then bring the blade to it and go from there. Much less damage, and it's a much more forgiving way to do it. All right, so I'm gonna say that's pretty good for now. Before heat treat, we're probably about 40 thousandths of an inch thick. This side is really, really nice. This side, I'm not sure if it'll show up with the camera or not. But well, it doesn't really show up too well. You can kind of see it there. I've got a slight variation in my bevels here, but that's fixable. It's nothing major, and so I'm gonna clean that up post heat treat. But for now, I'm calling that good. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna head over to the old workbench. Okay, so I've kind of got a bit of an idea here. I think the first thing we'll do, obviously, is put some Sharpie here, because I want to scribe a couple lines. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to taper this down so that the very end here is thinner than here. I don't want to go past where our handles are going to be, because I want that to be a nice even surface. So I don't know, I shouldn't talk like I know what I'm doing, because I don't. What could possibly go wrong? Okay, so we got that sucker marked up. And what I did off camera, because I don't want to waste your time, I found a piece of scrap. I don't know what this was from, and I just kind of experimented with roughly the distance that I'm going to need to get a taper. So if I put this roughly right on the very end there, the important part when you're doing this is that you hold this part down flat, because this is still, you know, we obviously don't want it like this or like this. We're going to get skewed measurements, but if I press here, I can actually feel we're resting on this flat here and here. It's fairly important. And then all I'm gonna do is I've got my knife maker scribe. You could use run your height gauge, whatever you have available. Even a drill bit would work for this. And we're just gonna kind of come in here and scribe a line. So you see now we've got a line that's angled there. I'll also need to do that on this side. And again, this is not super duper accurate, but I'm not sure what other way to go about this. But this should be close enough for me to grind too. I'm actually gonna mark the ends here as well. But for now, I think that'll work. So we've got this line, so we're gonna actually bring it down to a nice fine taper right there. I don't know, let's just go try grinding something. So one little thing to think about that I never thought about it before, but I kind of noticed it while I was working. Originally, like before we started the hand sanding, we had an uneven finish here, and essentially this whole area, like we basically had a couple grind lines that were coming in here, and this little area was different than the rest of this. And when I first started sanding, your instant reaction is just like, oh, let's just put a little more pressure here, and we'll just kind of take that away and blend it in with this. But that's not the right way to do it, because this is the low spot, and even though like this entire area in here was all nice and level, we basically have to bring this whole area to match our low spot here. So it was a lot of hand sanding. It probably took me 40 minutes. Mostly I did it with 220 grit, and yeah, I've actually just left it at 220 grit now, but I just, you know, your instant reaction is to be like, oh, let's just kind of crank it over here and we'll just even that out. But you really want to try and get this as flat of a plane as possible so that you get nice even glue up with your scales. Takes a lot of work, but I think that's the right way to do it. Alright guys, we're going to wrap it up right there. This has been a lot of fun, learned a couple things. The big thing, I think the big takeaway that I have from this is that at the end of the grinding when I was on the flat platen there, the way that I was doing it is I was standing right over my flat platen so I could look straight down it. And when you're doing that, and when I was bringing the knife up to it like this, you can actually see both lines on either side of the handle that we'd scribed in there, and it was really easy to kind of see how you were going, and you know, if you were uneven you could make corrections on the fly, and that was definitely the easier way to grind rather than, you know, I started out going like this and back and forth, and I think it would have been a much quicker process, you know, start out with like a really aggressive belt, work down to a finer one, but I think I would have spent a lot less time kind of jumping around trying to find this even spot, and then also less time hand sanding too, because I think we'd have been a little more consistent. I don't know, I've never seen anybody grind in tapers before, but this one came out fairly good. It's really nice and center. Actually, like when you look right down along the edge, right here, it lines up right dead center of the back there. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. Tomorrow what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get this heat treated and then get all that cleaned up, put some scales on it. I'm not entirely sure what to do about scales, maybe Kokobodo. I've got some other woods. I'm thinking wood for this, and then we'll probably use some brass pins. But yeah, that's the plan. There's a chance we might get this done tomorrow. I hope so. That'd be really, really cool. But we'll see. Well, thanks so much for hanging out with me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that already. You can just click on this little circle right here and that will subscribe you. And then over on this side of your screen, I'll leave you a couple other videos or playlists or something like that for you to enjoy. Thank you guys so much for watching. Cheers.